Okay, so here we are about to use the Sunjoe Woodchipper, and there really is nothing in it right now per se. I did some chipping with it recently. Let's see how it wants to behave. Seems mostly happy. Not a real big stick. Seems like it's doing okay, but you can hear the motor sort of sounds like it's bogging down, even though there's literally nothing in the chipper. Just throwing some little junk in there. But it just doesn't sound like it's supposed to. It sounds like it's struggling even if it's not doing anything, right? You would expect that the motor ought to be running at one constant speed, and this one seems to be struggling just a little bit. So let's see what's going on. This doesn't sound very happy, does it? And sometimes it's the button that's actually sticking on this thing, so I had to push the button again because it's like it turned itself off. So part of me wonders if it's the button that's the issue, but I think it's actually a bearing. But we'll take it apart and check it out. Okay, so let's talk about how this thing is built for a second. So it has a control panel on the top. Most of the stuff is in the center line of the machine. It has 7 Phillips screws around the width of it, along the center line that you need to take out, and I just took those screws out. So when I lift this piece off, I can actually kind of just let it hang. It may not be great for it. You can see there's an awful lot of stuff in here around it. Now, it has the chopper blades. You can take this piece off on the front, and that lets you get at this section that holds kind of the snout of that cutter. This center part is the transmission, and originally I thought that this thing would have some kind of junky plastic gearing or something in the transmission that would be awful. And it turns out it actually is a 2-stack set of planetary gears that are metal, and they're actually really well made. I was very impressed with that. This back section here is the electric motor, and this is my second Sunjoe that I bought, and I keep it outside in Houston, Texas without a rain cover on it. And I'll show you what killed the old one. Okay, so I have 2 of them here. I have my old one that I have disassembled, and the new one. The new one I bought from a guy, and he put a cover over it all the time, and it was used in Austin, and it was in perfect shape when I bought it. This one, I don't know as much of its history. It did pretty well till I trimmed a bunch of red tip photinia branches and stuffed them in this thing, and it seemed to bog down over time, and eventually it locked up. And I thought it was probably that this thing has some kind of junky transmission in it, and it is actually very useful for reducing the size of piles of things. And I was kind of really bummed when it broke. And it didn't have a sudden failure. It had kind of a gradual failure and a loss of power. And I thought for sure that this thing is going to have some kind of plastic gearing in the transmission, and there's going to be stripped out teeth on a little pinion somewhere. I wasn't sure how it was going to be done. But this was taken apart, so you don't need to take that off. Well, I'm just going to show the entire teardown, just for those who are curious, and it keeps you from having to do any of it on your machine. You will have to take out those 7 bolts. That'll reveal kind of this part of the machine. Now, there's a cover on the front here, and it locates what is really just there's a roach in there or something, a plain journal bearing. And that fits the end of this shaft. Okay, so that probably could use some grease. It might be a nice thing to do. I put a little bit of grease in there. Didn't help anything. This is the shaft, and it actually just slips right out. It is really heavy because it's transmitting a lot of torque. So this is the transmission for it, this aluminum piece. So I ended up taking the whole transmission apart and expected to find a bunch of really junky plastic gearing, and it was really nicely done. It has either two or three planetary gear sets stacked on top of each other, kind of like an automatic transmission in a car, and it gets a humongous speed reduction. Then it has a couple more plastic covers, but I'm taking off the important ones. You don't need to do this, I don't believe, but this is a round cover that goes on the engine altogether. This is a little cover that fits on the back. So this would be an important one to take off, because one of the real problems with this thing is actually the tiny little junky bearing at this end of this. If we look at this shaft, it has a spot here for a bearing, and on my machine that spot was totally, the bearing was just rusted into one piece, and it was really just junky carbon steel, and it was just not made to live in this environment. And it for a bearing, the machine was spending a lot of time and a lot of power trying to overcome the friction in this rusted, trashy bearing at the back of this thing. It probably cost them $1 for that bearing, and that killed this machine. The transmission ended up being just fine. I had taken out the little chopper at the front and wanted to sharpen the teeth on it. This journal bearing at the front, I actually sanded that with some emery cloth. This has been sitting outside for 6 months. I'd sanded it with some emery cloth and then put some white lithium grease in the bearing. That didn't help anything. So sometimes it does seem like the motor's overheating, or not heating, but maybe smells hot or something like that. It has some ventilation slots on the bottom. Those are pretty poor. So let's look at the bearing on the new machine, and I suspect it's going to be in big trouble. So I've taken out those 7 bolts, and I can kind of hang this off to the side like this. And if we look, there's an awful lot of stuff in here that's going to do no favors to the cooling of this motor. I probably will go ahead and blow this out with a leaf blower, but what I want to get at is this back bearing on here. And it's tough to see. If we lift this cover up, you can see that bearing right there. And it doesn't look great. This one doesn't look as bad as the other one, but it doesn't look good. Now, one thing that I would recommend trying is, you see I have a hole right here. I was guessing where that bearing is. I think you could drill a hole right here and spray WD-40 or spray white lithium grease or something to try to help the bearing that you have if you have trouble with it. Now realize there's an electric motor right behind it, so you don't want to go crazy with that thing. But that bearing was the source of these problems, and I ended up buying a ceramic bearing that I think I can replace this one with, and we'll see what it does for this machine. Okay, so now I blew it out and it's a lot cleaner, and I'm about to take out these 4 screws here that hold the motor upper cover on. And if you notice that there's 6 wires that come out that this thing is hanging on. Probably not the best for it to hang on it. Let's see if I can, can't really do much else with it, but I'm going to just leave it hanging like that. So just take a picture before you take it apart, and that way you know the arrangement of those wires. Okay, this is 4 just regular Phillips screws, but I used a blower a lot to blow stuff out of those 4 holes. I can tell the top of this looks like it's gotten hot in this spot, and there's a lot of junk around this bearing. What we want to do is we want to take this piece off, and it is the brush holder for the motor brushes. It also is the bearing holder, and the nice thing is it looks like we can get to 2 of those screws without taking anything further apart. So I'm just going to see if I can just turn this around and set it somewhere where it's not dragging too hard on the wires. I need a socket head screwdriver to get those other screws out, and they're very long. So this is the piece we're actually trying to get out. So I'll hold it here where you can see it a little bit better. It actually has the 2 brush holders here on the sides. You can see inside here, these are the brushes. Okay, they're graphite brushes, I guess, or carbon, whatever. They ride on the armature, and they're pushed in like that normally. So we're going to take apart these electrical connectors, and the way to do that is there's a tab right there, and if you push down on the tab, you should be able to just slip this electrical connector out. There's one on each side. I'll show you where that is at. Well, looks like we're not going to be able to get that one out. This side won't be too hard. I might be able to just do it right here. If I push down on this little brass finger, I might be able to just push that brush through that slot. I'm trying to do it with one hand. It's not easy, but okay, there it goes. So this brush is going to want to pop out. So just be careful with that brush. Set it to the side. Okay? So I'd like to do the same with the other side, but I can't get to it. But we need these 2 wires off of here. I'm going to let this thing hang for a second, and we're going to see there's 2 screws right here, one on each side. And then this seems to be the right screwdriver. I'll tell you what size it is. It is 7/16. Is that right? No. 1/4. Okay, 7/16 seemed awful big. So I'm getting in there on that screw head. And take this screw out. They're very long, and you want to be careful not to disturb the position of this thing very much. So I'm going to put my phone down. I'm going to take those 2 off. When I get the screws out, then I'm going to disconnect that second brush, the yellow one. Okay, this screw is finger tight, but like I said, that's a long screw. Okay, so I was just talking to myself, not recording anything. All right, so I got both screws out. Obviously, I said you want to do this with the machine unplugged. I'm hoping that this bearing carrier will come out and will clear. You don't want to break a brush, and you don't want to break any of those things. Okay, so a little wave lock washer came out. You can't really tell, but that washer is not, it's okay for it to be not flat like that. It's intended to do that, and it acts like a spring. All right, so I'm going to take this other brush holder off. So now these are my pieces that have come out. I got two brushes, one on each side, here and here. Okay, I have that wave lock piece. Now, if I look at the bearing race, you call it a race, but it's plastic. It's where the bearing gets crammed into. The bearing should, how a bearing works is you have an inner surface and an outer surface, and you have ball bearings in between, and they move separately, and it's supposed to be low friction. Well, this bearing is so junky, and this housing, you can tell, is deformed. It's actually, this wall, let's see, right here, is thinner than this wall, and it's gotten hot, and it's melted this stuff. And if we come back to the machine, there's our bearing, okay? This ought to spin. It is locked up. The armature spins, which is fine. That's what it's supposed to do. But this bearing here it doesn't roll. This should spin. And it actually has probably melted pieces of plastic stuck to it. So, how do we get this bearing off? There's a simple, you could use a bearing puller. I'm going to use a combination wrench, which is going to be kind of crappy, but we'll see how that works. Okay, so here's the bearing, and the plan is I'll probably end up putting this wrench on it and banging on the wrench or prying against another wrench or a screwdriver or something like that, and the intention is to try to get this bearing off of the shaft, which has that little white, probably insulator or something on it. This bearing should spin. It's not, and what it's been doing is it's probably been spinning in that plastic housing because it's totally locked up and it's actually adding friction. It should be an item of low friction. I might get a vice grip and see if I can twist it loose, but and I don't think there's a snap ring on the front of it. Normally you would have something like that to hold that on, but I'm going to bust this loose off camera so you don't see my improper techniques and that kind of stuff. But a hint is I'm going to end up with that and probably a screwdriver, and I'm just going to try to pry and pop that thing off. When I did it on my other one, that bearing broke into a bunch of pieces and flew all over, but also when I was looking at it, it was actually missing a couple of the ball bearings. It's so crappy. So I'll give you a little bit of insight into how I'm doing this. I'm actually putting a 9/16 wrench on here, and I'm getting a pry bar behind it, and I'm prying the bearing. And the bearing is moving along the shaft. As you can see now, it's being driven out. I'm doing it slowly and carefully because I want it in one piece. Okay, cool. Got that thing off in one piece. So there's not really a retainer, or no snap ring or anything trying to hold it on. This one is a little bit, it's definitely in better shape than the other one, but you can see there's rust on it, and it does not act like a bearing. So I may clean it up with a little bit of brake cleaner, but I'm just curious. Yeah, it does not want to spin in my hand at all. So we're going to go inside and mess with this thing next. Okay, so here I am at the table. This is the old bearing. This is the new bearing. This is a ceramic ball bearing off of Amazon. and it spins very easily, and it doesn't have any parts that are going to corrode. And I don't know that it requires any kind of lubrication. Maybe it does. I'm going to try to find out about that. Now, if I look at the two bearings, unfortunately, it's not a great fit, not as good as I had hoped, because this has a inner race that looks like it's a little bit smaller, and the OD of the two is not perfect if we look down on the top of it. But the plan is to put this white bearing into this housing. So I don't think it'll just drop in. It may be close. So I'm going to heat this thing in some water and we'll see what happens. So a quick Google tells me that all ceramic bearings need to be lubricated. Now, the old one, look how nicely that fits in that housing. It's just totally wallowed out and loose. So the plan is to submerge this housing in near boiling water for a little bit and then see if I can cram that bearing in there, but I need to remember that little bearing retainer too. Okay, so I have it sitting in some hot water. I'm going to pop this dude out, set that wave lock washer in there, and then see if this bearing will cram in. Okay, so second try with the hot water, and it popped in there very nicely. So I have the wave lock washer underneath it. I did do a quick Google, and yes, all ceramic bearings should be lubricated. So I'm going to lubricate this bearing. I'm using this stuff, which I think has a lot of molybdenum in it and would be good. Maybe I wish I had my ball bearing trailer grease. It's not going to take very much of this. I wish I had something maybe more appropriate. This probably is not the best, but this ought to be really light duty for this bearing too. Okay, so now the bearing is in place, and I packed it with grease. It would have been far nicer to pack it with grease before it went in there and a lot easier, but also with the water, I wasn't real crazy about having a bunch of water in this bearing either, but in any case, it is done and it spins very nicely and it actually fits in the hole, and it also probably straightens out that bore some. So now I'm going to try putting it back together. Okay, so here we are again. It's put back together. I just ran it for a second. I had a little bit of concern because I think that the ID of the ceramic bearing, it might have been better if it was slightly smaller. I had to like work and center the shaft of the electric motor into the bearing, so it's not a press fit or anything like that. The old one was a lot tighter. Maybe it shouldn't have been. But now when I turn it on, it is definitely a lot happier, and it doesn't really bog down on the same stick as before, and it's not making any, I don't know, wheezing noises or any kind of doesn't seem to have near the kind of labor difficulty that it did before. So I'll run some stuff through it and I'll see how it behaves. Alright, so now has the ceramic bearing installed, and let's see. You can tell it runs nice and fast. Sounds very eager to destroy. It doesn't bog down like it was doing before. Here's my helper. He's going to do his own part and chew some stuff up. it sounds so much more healthy than it did with the old rusty bearing in there. It chunks in one more branch. Back to normal. So now I got to figure out if I want to take this thing indoors every time it rains, or if it's okay for it to be outside. Anyways, it doesn't sound anywhere near as bad as it did before.